will be, yes, I got it. Got it. And I know that there will be people coming, but I'd like to go ahead and get going. First of all, well, thank Jeannie for posting last week's or the 2 weeks before the last session, and for actually being here and recording the session tonight, and we'll be able to post that. So really appreciate that, Jeannie, because it makes my work a lot easier too. It's very difficult to all do all this at once. Did not get as far as I expected to go. Out of the 5 sessions, I thought we'd get through 3. We only got through 2, but we'll go ahead and pick up with the 3rd section of the book tonight. The one thing that I wanted to do to start out this section that I had planned in advance is to start with a query. That would have been a perfect transition to section 4, but that's okay. We'll just do that when we start into section 3. And that is the query, what gives you hope? So I would like to ask friends right now, what is giving you hope at this time regarding climate and the what's facing us, and the challenges, and giving hope to actually be able to actually solve this problem. So there's only, just feel free to speak up and tell me what gives you hope. Unless you don't have any hope. Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself too. Everyone's muted, so feel free.
I often think I don't have much hope, but I have to have hope or I go crazy. But this afternoon I was looking at my new issue of the Catalyst. Do some of you see the Catalyst? It's the house organ of the Union of Concerned Scientists, and they are wonderful people. And I was looking at all the research that they've been doing and the way that they've been, that they really have made the oil companies and so forth. They've discovered a lot of chicanery and improper stuff, and made the chemical companies who are so rich and so powerful really shape up in some cases. And it's been an extremely difficult thing, because they had to find out from internal operations if these companies were not telling the truth, and if they were giving us the public reassurances and saying, oh, we're so green, we've done this, that, and the other for nature and the public, when they were actually lying. And that had to be found out, and in a number of instances was. And then there had to be, there were 3 stages. And then getting this known and getting the public to work on this. My memory is not as retentive as it should be, but it was very impressive. I could almost go and read it to you. It was really, anyway, I recommend the Catalyst, because those people are very smart, they work very hard, and I think they're very passionate about science and nature, and they give me hope.
Yeah, okay. But so for the people who have just joined us, I'm starting off with a query. What personally gives you hope? What's giving you hope right now as we confront this climate crisis?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I missed 2 weeks ago, so I don't know if there were introductions or anything, or if there are other people besides me who weren't here 2 weeks ago.
Okay. Well, we didn't do any formal introductions, but if people would like to do that, one thing I know that Dirk is here on the phone,
Mhm.
so we could go ahead and introduce ourselves. I'm Tom Yamaguchi, and the person that just spoke is Dorothy Gilbert and Jeannie Stowers. Anyone else like to introduce themselves? And maybe because we're here from different places, I know we have one person who's not in a Quaker meeting, but Quakers can introduce themselves like I'm in Berkeley meeting, and so is Jeannie and Dorothy. Anyone else?
And Dirk, and I'm from Berkeley meeting, and I share your unhappiness with having missed the last meeting.
Thanks, Dirk.
I'm Al Stoller. I write and talk on the radio about science and nature. And I am hopeful. For one thing, just looking over looking over many millions of years, our species and life on Earth has got through some really serious stuff. I do not use the word crisis. I really avoid using that word. We've obviously got some serious things to do, and looking at greenhouse gases, we should obviously be concerned, but I'm really concerned about the use of the word crisis. I feel a lot of people are getting very depressed, especially children are getting very depressed, and it really bothers me. But I'm very hopeful. If nothing else, I read as much as I can. No one can read all the scientific literature. And by scientific literature, I don't mean popular books written about science. I don't mean my own work. I mean what people are publishing in the journals. And I read that and I see we're learning more and more, understanding more and more about how not just the atmosphere, but the Earth system, taking the entire Earth, the planet, how it works. We're learning more and more about that. And I am really hopeful.
Okay. Right.
I'm Steve Wood in the Medical Hospital in South England, who is really helpful because at the time I didn't realize I was already force medicated. There was a time when the whole background noise of all universes came to a summit and then leveled off. But we're now going downhill. The crisis gap has got to say where in about January 2017 it was. The company got as far as it goes, is now unraveling. And as you come out of the pandemic, you'll find I'm not just the only person who's had a tremendous spiritual awakening. There's thousands around the world, especially those in social confinement, are slowly confinement. It's the best way to learn about the universe. If you can talk with someone about it, as I've been writing to this in America, that's why I've been being for spiritual awakening. Any person writing for spiritual awakening, I would most like to get the Pope to have some excuse to visit Fodben and say, here's a couple $1 million, you direct where they go to the rest, promote California business reform and see what happens when that happens. It's just one, I can't find, is anyone in Berkeley who's going away getting a physical book in the Pelican Bay prison of 1612 photographs of the most amazing, complicated African sculpture in the world. You buy a copy for about $500. I wanted about $100, it couldn't because the bank don't believe me and say, my debit card keep transfer for universes, France and losing them. That's why I got that money. I'd like to transfer those money to Berkeley then for them because the banks don't let me. I can't do anything except by waiting on the phone for an hour, which on the paper do is about £60 per hour to wait on the phones. So some way I can afford to sit down now just the phone and then
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Stephen. We'd like to continue on with some introductions because people have not gotten a chance to fully introduce themselves yet. Any more people who would like to introduce themselves and answer the queries as well?
I'm George Milliken, Berkeley meeting.
Okay. And other introductions?
Hi, everybody. I'm Barb Atwell from Berkeley meeting.
Okay. And I see Louise.
Hi, I'm Louise Neal, and I'm from Berkeley Friends Church. And so I think this book is giving me a lot of hope, as well as this group. After we met that first time, it inspired me to go look again at solar for our house. I started talking to family members about it. I haven't finished the whole book, but she's really a fantastic author. She's very knowledgeable, obviously, but her approach is, I think, what is most important, that she knows how to deal with so many different kinds of people. And she doesn't like to fly off the handle when when no one listens to her, but she really tries to figure out where they're coming from. And I guess that's the whole point, you know, of trying to have conversations with people who are different from you, have a different perspective. So anyway, thank you for hosting this. And I might not stay very long. It's my husband's birthday and my whole family's here. But I didn't want to at least be joined for the first part of it or so.
Okay, thanks for coming. Anyone else like to respond?
Yeah, I'll say something. And I'm so glad to see Louise here. I know Louise from another committee, and it's very good to see her. So I really like this book, and I very much liked her approach. I love that she was so good at handling conflict and criticism, and didn't seem to let it bother her, that she could really handle it. And I just loved her very reasoned way of handling, of, you know, dealing with all of this. You know, personally, I do often feel overwhelmed when I think about the entire problem altogether. So getting through those chapters of hers that were about the entire problem were hard, because I try to break it down into pieces so that it doesn't overwhelm me. And I also try to find something to do that's constructive about it. And that's how I manage to not feel completely hopeless. But sometimes I get, you know, I look at my daughter and think about, you know, her friends, and I do feel overwhelmed, you know, overwhelmed with shame, actually, you know, that we have let things get to this point. You know, it's just horrible. So, and then I just have to make myself go back to, like, okay, step one, what can we do? What can we do? Can we do? You know, because I don't want to live in that place of feeling overwhelmed and hopeless. So I love the book, and I'm really glad that, you know, that Tom brought this up to have it and for us to talk about it. And I also think it's cool that she's an evangelical Christian, you know, and that she's this big climate scientist. I think she's a great role model, you know, for that.
And she's in Texas, of all places.
Yes.
You know, teaching in Texas, and which is you know, has a lot of wonderful references to the book of talking to people in Texas and being able to communicate with them. You know, especially when they're saying, you know, when they're saying, I can't go with this Al Gore stuff and that, and then when she starts talking with them, finding places of agreement. So that's one of the reasons I like that. Any other responses to this query?
Texas is the pretty capital of the world. One of my ideas when I was high was to transfer all the business Texas to Siberia and make people travel in Siberian rivers to get there, but give everyone a free internet account. So you can have Zoom calls to anyone you want. If I'm visiting Siberia now, it is a luxury place where the information can't escape. That's then you can walk.
Okay. Yeah, well, I okay. Wasn't sure. Something about Siberia. How about you, Sarah? Did you have anything that?
Yes, I'll try to be quick. So yeah, Sarah Terrell from Berkeley Meeting. And one thing that gives me hope, that what I see in my actual, you know, day to day, what I do kind of thing is, I'm seeing people out there enjoying the natural world and experiencing that. And I think the more that we can do that and encourage each other to do that. I think that's going to be a big step forward. I had the experience a week ago, last Friday. As some of you might have heard, that Walden at Sierra Friends Center has a new executive director. And she was in the Bay Area. Her daughter is actually going to California College of Arts and Crafts. So she came down here for a visit and also visiting some other places and seeing a play and things like that down here. But she said she wanted to. Was talking with her about the walks that we've been taking along the Hayward shoreline, and she says, "Oh, I'd love to do that." And so we got together. We went out to the Hayward shoreline and we walked along. And I was kind of embarrassed because I didn't realize that the bird guide was sitting here on my table. I thought it was in my boyfriend's pocket at his work, but it was actually here. I could have grabbed it and I didn't. But she was still very enchanted and impressed with just everything she was seeing, and the fact that I actually knew some of the birds and could tell her, oh yeah, that's a egret and that's a whatever. So she was just really enchanted. And this is somebody who's spent time in places like Haiti, right? So she's not like a newcomer to kind of the natural world, but she was just so enchanted and so delighted. And she said, God, I want to do more of this. I'll come back. I want to see the other side of the shoreline, which is more interesting, but we just didn't have time to go there to the Eden Landing side of the shoreline. But yeah, the more people can do that and really, tap into that, love of the natural world, I think that's going to be a big step forward. And that does give me hope because I see people doing that every weekend, pretty much. So
Great. Just like
And
to
there's
add,
a lot of birds in
yeah.
Britain as well, because that's one of my main indigenous cultures I love for the countryside. The other big indigenous culture in Britain is rock climbing pottery, which originated in Britain. The first pottery we sent was Gaping Ear by a Frenchman in 1830. The first rock climbing done was near Smoking Hall, the next needle in 1881 by Nathaniel Smith. And I found out when I Googled it recently that it's the grade for its first ascent as a grade from hard, very difficult to hard, severe. So that I've been told also it's as difficult as as a traverse on the northwest of the Niagara, which theoretically I've been told that I've got the ability, if I could just remember my foot, so the northwest of the Niagara.
So I just wanted to say that this query also came up. Hayhoe did actually a webinar a few months ago in preparation, to actually on the idea of getting people talking about the book, and actually posed this query. And a number of us actually responded by what gave us hope was all the youth activism happening in the world. And especially thinking about today, because youth activists not only have been very involved with climate change, we think of Greta Thunberg, but also today is the 4th anniversary of the March for Our Lives. The students of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas were, after that horrible shooting on Valentine's Day 4 years ago, actually decided they were going to organize, and they marched on Washington. And so all these young people rising up and responding to these crises is a reason for hope. So appreciate everybody else's input on this. One thing I'd like to do, also speaking of hope, I will attempt to share my screen. And believe it or not, is everyone seeing Mr. Inhofe? That's
Yes.
Senator, okay. That's Senator Inhofe there. I actually used this photo before regarding we had and also that video was also posted. I did a presentation on the various carbon pricing proposals that were up before Congress. And so I was going through them and talking about Mr. Hayhoe. I guess one also reason for hope is the fact that he has announced that he is retiring. So he's taking his snowball with him, and he's going away. And so hopefully that means that those who replace those who are retiring for Congress might have an opportunity to have a maybe a different perspective and be able to see the difference between climate and weather. So that was something that I had wanted to bring up regarding the third section on the threat multipliers. And maybe I just would also just reintroduce something that was brought up in the last thing. And let's see if I can share this as well. Let's see. No, I'm not doing that. Okay, let's try something else. Let's see here. Let's see if that works. Okay, now I will try to share this. Okay, is everybody seeing the 6 Americas?
Yes.
I'm concerned,
Okay.
cautious, disengaged, doubtful,
What's that?
dismissive.
Yes, yes. So this was something we went through in the first section, and these are the different what they call the 6 Americas of climate change or the climate crisis. There are the alarmed people, the concerned people, the cautious, the disengaged, the doubtful, and dismissive. And maybe I'll even, for people who were not there, go ahead and sort of do the definitions. And that was that the alarmed people are convinced global warming is happening, human caused, an urgent threat, and they strongly support climate policies. However, most, however, do not know what they or others can do to solve the problem. The concerned people think human-caused global warming is happening, is a serious threat, and support climate policies. However, they tend to believe that climate impacts are still distant in time and space. Thus, climate change remains a low priority issue. The cautious haven't yet made up their minds. Is global warming happening? Is it human caused? Is it serious? The disengaged, they know little about global warming. They rarely or never hear about it in the media. The doubtful do not think global warming is happening, or they believe it is just a natural cycle. They do not think much about the issue or consider if it is a serious risk. And finally, the dismissive, they believe global warming is not happening, human caused or a threat, and most endorse conspiracy theories. Global warming is a hoax.
Tom,
So-
excuse me,
Sure.
can we use these words concerned without buying into your definitions, or is this it?
Well, that's what the definitions that the Yale project was working on.
Which project? Pardon me.
The Yale communications
Okay,
project.
so we either use their definitions or we can't use these words.
I'm not understanding what you're talking about. Let me stop sharing the screen for a minute. Yes, what do you mean?
As I said in my introduction, I'm concerned, but I can't buy into this definition of concern that you just gave. So I don't know what word to use.
Okay. Well, as I said, this is a project. If you look, it's at the beginning of the book. This is a project of the Yale University, college.
Yeah, Tom, I really don't care. I guess I'll stop using the word concerned.
Okay. It's a way of us to understand where different people are coming from in the climate debate.
I first think it's brilliant. I'd like to know how to get a copy of that image to present at our local environment group in Manchester.
Yeah,
It's
like
very important to do
like
that.
last week, I was actually asking people, where do you fit in yourself? How would you define yourself? Are you alarmed? Are you concerned? And many of the people, were in that general area. I don't think that we had any dismissives like Senator Inhofe. And one of the things that we were talking about is the fact that that dismissive group is shrinking. So when we're talking to people, one of the things that Hayhoe was talking about is focusing on the people whose minds we can change and who will be most receptive. Stop wasting time on the dismissives because, their minds are never going to change anyway. Okay. So I don't know if that's answering your question, Al, but this was something that's a framing tool that help people understand where people are coming from in their relation to the issue of climate change. Sarah?
And also, I think as with any system, it's going to take basically, I think it was basically the whole population of the US and divided up into 7 very broad categories. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to fit everybody comfortably into one slot or the other. But I think most people could kind of look at it and sort of kind of say, well, I kind of more identify with this one, right? So it's not going to be perfect. That's my main message.
Yeah, of course not. It's oh, oh, did I
I think that
Sarah, you're sharing your screen. Okay.
sorry, I hit the wrong button by accident.
Okay, that's okay.
I should know better.
That's all right. That's okay. Yeah. So is there any
I
other?
have possibly a different approach. I want to come off the drugs and maybe able to do some quaker terrorism. For example, moving the to Mohammed from the Tabara to the bottom of the Arizona Meteor crater and have tunnels made from copies of some British-based caves going down to the bottom of that so that people can learn how to read the Quran by going through caves that are the Arabic strip of the Quran from many miles away, for example, all the way from California. With
I'm not going to advocate. I'm not going to advocate for terrorism, but
yeah, but peaceful terrorism.
Peaceful terrorism.
I could also probably shoplift the gold from in Fort Knox into copies or gold copies of the artifact book if the people that can be with the armed guards who are the military high command for the whole of the terrorism. Nobody can kill anybody unless both military guards and military approve it. If they don't, the bullet will turn to a raisin or a peanut. It's the peanut or a chocolate. So you can have an anti-gun violence by going around driving Oakland with a box of candies and see if the bullets replaced by the candies when you get home. So you how many bullets you got in your bullet candies. That's what if you can choose yours. I know we can, but that's how Christ did it. He was concerned with showing how to heal people. But the most important, of course, he did the 5 of the which happens if you put the noses in a dark bag so you don't see them being produced. So that's why you can produce thousands of pieces of bread and loaf if you put them in a bag and cutting out from hand to hand.
Well, I would say definitely, definitely peaceful means are the most effective. And
peaceful terrorism.
Yeah.
Most I mostly shot people here by turning up naked out of my room to shout at them, which is why I get from virtually effective because one prison here loved me tremendously because the first time I saw him, another person came and started attacking him, and because the nurses are trained not to come in unless they get back up, they were calling the alarms. I was going to attack the person, got him off him, and then immediately said, "We must reconcile it," because the reason parents attack each other is because they genuinely believe that each other want to kill each other. And dogs don't do that. All they do is make you feel confused. You don't know whether people want to kill you or not.
Okay.
That's why.
We're getting a
Anyway,
bit off the topic.
Yeah,
Can we start moving back?
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Tom, I was wondering what your plan is for this discussion, because we seem to have done introductions and 4 people have answered the query. Do you want one query? Do you want other people to answer that query, or do you have other queries?
Sure.
How do you want to organize this?
Sure. That's fine. Did you want to answer the query on what's giving you hope right now?
Yeah, I could if you want me to.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Well, first, I would say that before I read this book, I was pretty hopeless, because it seems to me if you look at human history, since the agricultural revolution, the human race has had a very successful history of spoiling its environment in many different ways. It's never really succeeded in avoiding doing damage to the environment. But this book, I think, is giving me maybe 3 sources of hope. One is that it seems that some of the people in industry who have a fair amount of power, some have gotten the message. Apparently, United Airlines has started having the option of fueling its planes with biofuel in Los Angeles. The head of Unilever has said he's all out for responding to climate change. And they didn't actually mention in the book, but the Catalyst mentioned that the Ford Motor Company is making its most popular pickup truck, the F-150, is going to be electric, and it can go 300 miles, and the battery will be so powerful it can power the house for 3 days if you happen to run out of electricity. So it looks like they think they can make money out of pushing green energy. Second source of hope is that it seems that, I mean, I've been very discouraged because there's so many politicians who just seem to have their head in the sand on this subject. But this book mentioned a lot of ways in which grassroots people the message is spreading among the grassroots. And she mentioned clusters of where one person will buy an electric car and have his wire going out to the street, and other people in the clusters nearby will be inspired by the example and buy electric cars. And so the message is kind of catching on mouth to mouth. And of course, her idea is that we can all be evangelical about it and convince at least those who are concerned. And a final source for which I knew before I read the book, and that is that the cost of green energy seems to be coming down, maybe getting cheaper than cost of dirty energy.
That's true.
Worldwide.
Yeah, that is also a cause for hope. Yeah.
Excuse me. I spoke before, but I just wanted to respond to what George was saying. I read that in the Catalyst as well about the electric truck, and it really seemed like very good news.
Yeah. So apparently, if you don't need a truck, you're better off with a Prius than with a truck. It's not very efficient, but it's better than a gas guzzler.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks. I didn't want to just rush through it and not give everybody an opportunity to respond to the query, but I thought it would be just good to actually start talking about some of these things in section 3. And I thought it'd be helpful to go back to that 6 Americas to get an understanding of where some people are coming from, especially when the difference between being concerned and being actually alarmed. And I think a lot of it is discussed when Hayhoe talks about that psychological distance. Sometimes it's basically our conception of risk differs, and many times we don't really see something as something that's really imminent. We see something down the road. So when I spoke about what got me to alarmed, it was when I actually saw that climate change isn't something that's just happening in the next century. It's happening now, and the fact that the drought, no rain for weeks and weeks, months, forest fires that are just devastating the air, the sun, hardly coming out during the daytime. These have certainly moved me in the alarm category. And so one of the things that I also talked about was the, basically rolling the dice, and she actually mentions in that section 3 about rolling the weather dice. And one of the things that I thought was helpful for me to talk about climate change to other people was saying, imagine the dice themselves being the climate, but each individual rolls of the weather. So, yes, certainly we can have this really, really bad winter storm, but that's just one other event. And with climate change, we're loading those dice. So those extreme weather events happen more and more frequently. The power of the hurricanes, the severity of the drought, those things are happening more and more as we load the dice. Anybody else have any reactions to that section 3 on threats and our perceptions?
Well, I just want to, this might sound like it comes out of left field, but, I did my high school and education in Florida. And you mentioned the March for Our Lives, after the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. And it always struck me as so ironic that the high school was named after Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, who was a major, major environmentalist. Mm-hmm. She's the one who brought awareness of the importance of Lake Okeechobee in Florida to the world. She wrote a book called The River of Grass and pointed out that it wasn't just some big ditch. It was crucial to Florida's environment. Her work helped the environmentalists who, like, I worked with when I was in college, Florida Defenders of the Environment, to help counter a lot of the work that the Army Corps of Engineers did that almost ruined Lake Okeechobee. And so every time I hear somebody talk about that shooting, I just feel like I want to stop them and say, let's also think of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas and her life's work, because it was about hope for her, I think to me, that was always the flip side of that horrendous event. That on the downside, it's like her name is now associated with it. But, I just want people to know who she was and what she did, and that it's very, very relevant to this book. She worked hard, and her work is really important to people in Florida. Yeah, so sorry about that.
No problem.
Digression.
No, it's not a digression at all. I mean, yeah, it's, yeah. Let's see, I was also wanted to, let's see, I'm flipping around here. Okay, just looking at my notes.
I've just had brainwave which is written in the chat. Can you read it, please?
Okay, let me look at this. For hope, I would suggest that you do not go down the dead end of using biofuels to replace fuel in airplanes. Stop flying and travel by hitchhiking on the freighting industry or container ships and long long distance trucks. I'm reading this for a while because Dirk Nyhart isn't able to read the chat. You could easily put on extra cab in the trucks for a hitchhiker to cross the continent in about 3 to 6 long distant trucks, hitchhike coordinated by some electric internet program like BSKY for finding beds to hitchhike about the country. Can Manhattan Friends get a hitchhiker's guide to cross the Atlantic or on container ships and also through the Panama Canal to San Francisco? Is San Francisco or nearby have a freight container? Could Berkeley Friends organize hitchhiking through California ports found on Greyhound buses, the most carbon efficient form of fossil fuel travel, or did they bankrupt in the pandemic? I had a friend that actually was involved in getting sailboats going for shipping freight. So that's one possible solution, win solution.
We can replace freighting, even for long distance, for concrete, cement, and fuel by transferring it through the universes. If Christ can make fathers to riches appear in a bag, then if we learn to look at enemies, I lived the martyr's death over and over again. I've smashed my head against the walls so many times that recently I didn't notice I turned this back of my head to gravel until I got up from lying on the ground. There was a patch of blood there, which made them put some medicine on my head. That's how unconcerned I smashed my own skull up. Because I've had 2 very major back injuries, which caused 2 head injuries. I've had 2 depressed fractures in the skull, which caused no symptoms at all. One of which I was given a punch by Rachel Hanson, who is now an enlightened dead friend, because she, in punching me so hard, I transferred to her all my love, and she transferred all her hate. And know that she hated 4 psychiatrists, why every time that you heard depot, she transferred to the psychiatrist where she loved punching me. She's punched me at least 250 times. She said,
Yeah.
Why do you laugh and punch me?
Friends, could we get back to the topic?
Yeah, Steve, yeah. One thing Sarah was asking, what is the friend of this Marjorie Stoneman Douglas book? Do you know the title?
Oh, River of Grass.
River of Grass. Okay, yeah. One thing I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, that's in the chat, please. The title of the book.
It's river, singular.
River, singular. River of Grass.
One thing she also talks about is about the direct threats of our health. And one of the things that I thought was interesting was asking how many cigarettes can we smoke before we develop cancer? But when you think of it, a lot of the things that we can do on the climate issue actually benefits our health too, by cleaning up the air. So I thought that was a very important thing too. Maybe we can move on to the section 4 on We Can Fix It. And I thought there was an interesting quote here where she says, someone said, I don't want the government telling me how to set my thermostat. One of the things that she's talking about is people fearing solutions. And one of them is that people don't want the government to tell them what to do. They want to be free. It's a very common thing for people in this country. Another fear is that it will hurt the economy. So the question that was interesting also was, is the cure worse than the disease? And one of the things that I immediately thought of when I heard that was when Donald Trump, early in the pandemic, actually wanted to open things up, really, open up the economy, open up everything, with that type of thing that the cure being worse than the disease, that, that the economy would, the hurt from the economy would be worse than anything regarding the pandemic, the effects of the pandemic. I just wondered if anybody had any thoughts regarding that, about people who expressed concern about the economy. No. Anybody?
Yeah, I thought her point was very well taken, that the evidence she has that people who are climate deniers, just like people, it's highly correlated with who is a Trump supporter. And those people are, also people who have problems with change, dealing with change. That's it's not that they're evangelical Christians, it's not anything. They have an issue with change. So, I mean, progressives tend to say, sure, just retrain coal miners to work, to put up solar panels, and that's all you have to do. Well, of course, that's naive and not very well thought out, and easier said for you to do it than for somebody else to do it. But the reality is that people, a lot of people have, it would be a complete change of lifestyle and likely a complete change of location, so I think if we think of it in those terms, of that people who resist are often people who have real problems dealing with change, that just saying we can shift the economy is not, to one that is more based on renewables is not an easy thing to do, but you just have to start someplace, and I think a lot of people tend to be really patronizing when dealing with people like coal miners and people who are, working for the not the power companies, but the oil companies and things like that. It is a big deal on an individual level to make those kind of shifts, and shifting your economy is, is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
People are so heavily invested in where they live and all the things that you mentioned, and changing those, they really don't want to do it. We should understand that. I really think you made a good point, as did she.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing that she talked about was regarding the Paris climate talks, was, or the Paris Agreement was talking about the climate potluck, and all these countries bringing different things to the potluck, and so we can feel like, each individual country can only do so much, especially when we're talking about the rich countries versus the poor countries. So, but each one has something that they can bring to whether it be, reducing, reducing, the emissions themselves, or helping someone else reduce their emissions, supporting someone else's reduction of emissions. So, yeah. And let's see. Yeah, one thing also, she likes to actually use the term dismissives as opposed to deniers. And she goes into that, why she prefers that. Interesting thing was that, was talking about population control. She brought up something that I've seen as well before, is that Actually, educating women is probably about the best form of birth control that we can come up with. So if we really want to put a handle on population, it's definitely empowering and educating women. So
And improving the countries' economies.
and
The
yes,
best thing you can do is to educate women.
right, exactly. Yeah.
And providing the availability of contraception.
Right, exactly. Yeah, well, educated women are more likely to be able to have access to contraception. Yeah. Let's see. Let's see. I had a query that related to that Six Americas, and I'd like to go ahead and throw that out. Is can you think of ways to craft a message to one of the groups of, actually when I was talking about health, can you think of a ways to craft a message to people who have concerns on health and the climate? As I said, I thought of that way of saying, that in fact, she goes through a whole different things to say that the climate change is actually involved in, air pollution, but dealing with disease, transmission of disease. And actually, she even mentions talking about turning waste into fuel. So that's not only cleans up the environment, but it also cleans up the cleans up a waste problems that would cause the disease. Just so, did anybody have any other ideas about that? If somebody wants to say is their concern, but it's not nothing that's really affecting me on my level. It's something that's down the road. Anybody have any ideas of what they would say to that person?
Well, to what degree is the increased presence of tropical diseases, in our population related to climate change?
Are you asking the question?
Well, I mean, I think that's the question for
Yeah.
people to think about in that context.
And what would you say?
Well, we know that it is. I mean, we know that diseases that have not been seen so much in the north are seen more often in the north now. Indeed, there's, one could argue that to some degree, COVID is probably not so much a climate-related disease as a population disease. But,
yeah.
He points out that telling someone statistics just has them hold their hands over their ears. People get ozoned by statistics, and in fact, if they're even slightly disposed to be anti-science, they're more anti-science and more statistics they hear. So I don't think telling someone about statistics is going to pull them into the fold of understanding the climate emergency.
That's a good point. Yeah. I think one of the things that she probably would say is, tell your story. What's, how's this? How are you affected by it? What's going on that why are you concerned, right? That's would probably be better than statistics. Yes, Barb?
Yeah, one of the more hopeful things I got the book was a method or a way to start the conversation. And to me, that's the most hopeful thing I've read in the last year. And I've been reading a lot, mainly because I feel like she is so good at telling stories herself, right? And then, you know, making the analogies that are things like the potluck that a lot of people can relate to. And I've had more conversations in the last week than I've had in the last year about energy and climate change. And to answer the query, I think I would probably start asking questions, and that seems to initiate some kind of common ground that allows me to relate to them. And so if I was just talking to somebody, a neighbor, for example, I'd say, you remember September 17th, 2020, when you walked outdoors and the entire neighborhood was orange because there was so much wildfire smoke that we couldn't see the sun? I said, do you remember that? You know, and did that affect you guys? Because it sure did me. You know, so I would start with a question and maybe talk about, you know, our household where there are vulnerable people and, you know, that kind of thing. And then just start the conversation about other ways that our health is affected. So anyway.
Right, yeah. And you bring up actually a good point, Barb, that I wanted to get to. And that is, you know, we've been talking a lot about energy in recent weeks, but in the context of the price of gas, you know. And so, as you said, you know, this is an opportunity for a conversation starter. In fact, the other night we had our local meeting of Citizens Climate Lobby, and that was actually brought up as a way of talking about it when someone complains about the price of gas, that you can start that conversation on climate, you know. So the question would be, gee, you know, we need to drill more oil. And in fact, I'll even offer that as a query. What if someone comes to you and says, yeah, we just need to drill more oil. You know, it's the cost of energy of gasoline is so high. What are we going to do? But we need more oil. Any people here who would like to answer me? Let me say I'm the one that says complaining, want to drill more oil. What would you say to me?
Well, since the price of oil is determined by the world market, the amount of production in California doesn't really influence it.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, it was brought up at our meeting that actually that we continue to be exporters of fossil fuels. The United States actually exports, and as the Biden administration, and once that's another part of it too, is to blame Biden for the cost of energy. That there are sources that are not even being tapped to the amount that they could be, because oil companies are sitting on the money for, you know, for them to be more profitable. So any other people have any response to that about
well, the risk killing people is statistics, but I would just observe the finitude of our water, the finite amount of oxygen, and the finite amount of fossil fuels. And what are we going to leave for 1,000 years from now?
Good point. Good point. Anyone else? Well, one point that was also, yes, Jeannie.
I was just going to say, you know, I think in a way I see a contradiction between this point and, you know, her talking about it's not very effective to start focusing on people's fears, that's not the way to make the argument. On the other hand, if I start talking about, you know, how climate change has affected me, I would start with exactly what Barb started with, that horrible day, you know, where the sky and the light was orange, and then talk about things like Miami already flooding, and you know, those things are scary. You know, so it's a good story, but I'm not sure I know how to write or to think of a positive story.
Yeah.
You know,
The difficulty is that no matter what happens, we're going to be confronted with change.
yeah.
You know, to what degree do we have control over that change, whether it's change from working in the refinery at a nice union job to working at a solar collector installer, it's a non-union, non-benefit job, or, you know, living in Florida and being flooded out. You know, there's changes are inevitable, and we don't want them to happen, but we kind of hope they happen on somebody else's watch.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Also understanding, you know, that people generally have real fears, as you said, you know, the union worker fearing, you know, a loss of income, a loss of benefits. And one of the things that we talked about the other night at the CCO meeting was definitely listen to people and say, yes, you're right. The energy is very, very expensive right now. We need to do something. Would you consider, you know, the fact that we need to accelerate our you know, a clean energy economy, and how we would do that? So, and that would, you know, get into, well, how do we do that transition? You know, putting a price on carbon would be one way that we could do that. Yeah.
But a lot of people would just say, no, we need to drill more oil. And then what do you say?
Well, that was the original question, you know, that can we really drill our way out of this situation? You know, I like the analogy of people with, you know, to building more freeways. And somehow is, well, we need to solve the traffic problem by building more freeways. And amazingly enough, we build more freeways and suddenly we have more cars to fill up the freeway. That's maintaining the traffic problem. So,
if we build them, they will come.
right. So it looks like we need to have another solution. And yes, as Joe says, you know, it's time to accept the fact that we're gonna have to change, and how the best to implement that change to cause the least amount of pain is the challenge.
Well, motivating change is effective by pandering to fear. Look how successful the Republican Party has been pandering to fear at changing the whole dynamic of virtue within our society.
That's an interesting thought, Dirk. Yeah. Yeah, fear is definitely a powerful motivator, or can be, but it can also shut people down. You know, as Hayhoe says in the book, I mean, it can lead people to just be immobilized. And so when you think of it, maybe the fear that Republicans are using politically is to basically for that goal, is to get people to shut down or to resist change, you know, to actually, you know, disengage in a way. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, they're very successful at it, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
But, you know, a lot of people around the country, they know things are changing. They've got more hurricanes to deal with that are more powerful. They've got more tornadoes that are more powerful. You know, there are more floods. You know, people are waking up to the idea that something has changed. You know, not everybody is willing to say it's the climate causing all this, but you know, they can see these things changing, and those things are scary. But yeah, I mean, I have
The
to.
water rising. I was just
Oh yeah,
the water rising.
yeah,
In Miami and other places.
right. In the New York, you know, in New York City, you know, going into the subways. But yeah, I totally get the point that we don't want to pander and scare people. And yet these things are happening. You know, what do you do with these events?
And they are scary.
Yeah. I mean, I have a cousin who lives in Charleston and South Carolina, and she started talking last year, I guess. It must have been in the spring. Her neighborhood flooded. And she was like, oh, there might be something to this climate change after all. My neighborhood never used to flood. And, you know, her house, you know, her yard and everything was flooded. I mean, the whole neighborhood was flooded. And she's like, this is definitely different. Yeah, when it starts happening to yourself or your family, I think it starts becoming real.
We're
Certainly.
neighbors.
That's true, but we like to think of ourselves as rational and informed people, and we are endeavoring to sway the opinions, activities, and behaviors of people who we might think of as less rational and less informed people. Now then, let's just take it on a personal level. What would make you change? What changes can you make in your behavior that you are willing to do for the planet? I mean, I can make changes in my energy use, but is that all I can do personally? What can I do is my question. And I did so far in the book, I haven't concluded I got it from audible.com, so I get to hear her voice, and she has such a wonderful voice.
Yes, she reads her book very well. She was actually reading from a webinar that I was talking about a few weeks ago. Another thing, you know, you reminded me of, and this actually gets into section 5, but she actually talks about, this is section 4 or section 5, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, it's section 5. She talks about adding, every year she adds 2 new low carbon habits into her life. And she talks about the things that she's doing, including, you know, less air travel. And one way that she can do that, of course, is more Zoom meetings, also consolidating trips, so that she creates a plan for, if she goes on a trip, she definitely goes and makes the most of that trip by hitting the most number of places before coming back. So I thought that was really interesting, and I don't know if anybody else saw that about adding 2 new climate behaviors.
Yes, I thought it was a great idea, a very concrete, you know, incremental step that, you know, most people would be able to do. Yeah, I thought it was a great idea.
Yeah. Anybody have any ideas of you know, of 1 or 2 climate behaviors you'd like to initiate for yourself this year?
See, that's the problem that I get caught in 2 ways here. I mean, one way is that I'm not really comfortable with the notion that the changes we would have to make are changes that would make our lives more difficult. I mean, Do you know any Tesla owners who want to go back? You know,
No.
I don't. But
I know one family that went back.
you do.
They got stranded because their car was out of battery and they couldn't get where they needed to go. And
Mhm.
there was an emergency. And they said, no more.
Um,
There are things that are hard to give up. I should probably get rid of my beloved gas stove and get an electric
Yeah.
stove. I don't like electric stoves, but they are better for the environment.
Well, okay, I mean, that's the very issue that I think about. You know, I have a, you know, a 1950s O'Keefe and Merritt, I guess, which was sort of the high point of the gas stove design.
Mhm.
You know, it's just wonderful. My daughters have electric induction stoves, which it's easy to cook on, except they're hard to use with woks. But otherwise, they're very easy to cook on, and they are environmentally much better. Now, the problem is that the induction stoves have a limited lifespan. And
Oh.
my daughter is on induction stove number 2 now, after only 7 years of the first one.
Boy.
Merritt is, you know, is what, 60 years old now. And so there are those dilemmas, you know, how willing am I to change? Am I willing to get rid of the O'Keefe and Merritt and get an induction stove?
Well, if you have to keep changing the stove every 2 or 3 years, but the stove you've had for years and years, I mean, there's the issue of junking up the planet too.
Well, there's that problem, but I know my stove puts out methane.
Uh-huh. Well, then maybe, yeah.
Pardon me.
No, go
I've
ahead.
been
Gary.
pricing the induction stove, thinking I can give my Barbara a little treat. And I discover that I have to change the electricity and get a 220-volt lead into the house, and 40 something ampere. Pay an electrician a big bundle, and $250 delivery costs, and $2,000 cost for the induction stove. It just seemed very pricey.
Yeah.
For how many years do I amortize that cost of giving up the gas stove? I'm still going to do it, but I'm not sure it makes financial sense. I'm doing it because to my mind it makes climate sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a Wedgwood gas stove. It's probably 85 years old, and I do most of my cooking in the microwave, but I still use it and it works fine. I don't see any reason to give up my Wedgwood stove.
Okay.
Don't.
Okay, so we talked about what we're not changing. Is there any ideas on what you think you can change? This, you know, if you
Well,
can
I guess
change
I could do more cooking on the microwave.
Yeah, yeah.
I used to cook my oatmeal once a week on the gas stove. I suppose it could be cooked in the microwave. I don't know.
People do.
Yeah. Change your
If you have rolled those rabbits of milk or unused repetitive fresh chopped soft fruits, apple pears, microwave about a minute and a half, and put the whole lot soak overnight and the microwave them in the morning. That's the main way I have my what I call this called my soft green butter breakfast, which is either oats or music or a whole cereal with plenty of about 3-4 different fruits, preferably with some berries in season. And some sunflower seeds and flax seeds and things soaked overnight in milk or apple juice. Plenty of fresh sugar on top. It's a good balance with starting with meal with. And what I developed for an alcoholic friend who otherwise could eat in the morning when she loved drinking, but eating often was so drunk she couldn't eat.
Yeah. Barb, do you have something?
And that puts a great reading at that would like Thomas to read out for the benefit of the some of the things are spell checked in different words. That's why you stumble sometimes.
Yeah, Barb?
Yeah, so I was just wondering, you know, I have a lot of things I could be doing. One of the more interesting and parts of this book is her assessment that we need to just talk to people. And we were going back to that whole, you know, the scare tactics and how people disengage. And I feel like there's a lot of people, and I'm just talking about my neighborhood and my family, that are apathetic, but it's really just a coping exercise, right? Or a mechanism. And I feel like talking about it is the way to begin that step down the road for education and for people to be aware. And, you know, I feel like this book was a big light bulb for me. So I appreciate that, Tom.
Yeah. Yeah, and I should add that you know, diet is certainly something that people can work on, change the foods. You know, whether it's just eating foods in seasons. Strawberry Creek Meeting for a number of years had a thing we called a locavore potluck, and that is we would bring, you know, to meeting for the potluck foods that didn't travel vast distances to get to us. So I even was able to bring things from my backyard pear tree, you know. So, but you know, we're of course we're really blessed in this state by, you know, having so much food that is grown locally and near to us. We can buy in the farmers market. But yeah, diet is something, eating less meat and things like that.
You know, going lower down the food chain, right? Also solar, the fact that, you know, we live in a great city for walking everywhere, you know, I think we're very fortunate that way.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, very good. Yeah. Any other thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, I live in a traditional suburb, and so we have yards with grass. And so, you know, some people have converted that to, you know, natural native plants, and gotten rid of the grass. And, you know, my next door neighbor and I, we always talk about, you know, when is it going to be time to do that? Well, I think it's time to do that. I mean, we're looking at one year after another of drought. And, you know, it's just, you know, it's just kind of ridiculous just to have this, you know, grass, you know, just green grass and just, you know, all this water going into keeping the grass green and stuff. And so I think this summer is going to be it, you know, that have to get somebody in here and, you know, and redo it and just get rid of that. And, you know, we'll save a lot of water and, you know, and create, we've already have a lot of plants that attract bees and hummingbirds and stuff. And so, you know, we'll continue to do that. These are the times that I really miss Katharine Anderson, because I would go to her and talk to her about stuff like this. And she actually made the recommendation for a tree we have years ago. It's called a strawberry tree. And I'll tell you, the bees love it and the hummingbirds love it. You know, I think I could do with more of those.
I have done that in my front yard. It's all plants, no lawn. It's all plants, and mainly native plants, although I have some roses too, and they do drink. And then in the back, I have the same thing. And I have chosen plants that do attract hummingbirds and bees and so forth. There's something of a trade-off because I have one kind of tree dahlia that's very beautiful. It grows to be 12 feet high and has this canopy of beautiful lavender flowers with big gold centers. And it's just all the life that comes to these things the butterflies and the bees and the hummingbirds, and it's just such a show, and you feel very good doing it. And I have big trees where birds can live too. The trade-off is that the tree dahlia takes a good deal of water, and I have to say that almost every time I water my property, there's this moral decision. Am I going to take this water? And of course now it's really worse and worse. You think of all those poor farmers, and at the same time it seems kind of pointless to just let your garden wilt and die. So I do mulch, you know, I have thick mulch and so forth, and I must say I can go once a week without watering, but you know, I think about it.
Oh, I thought I saw
Well, I'm
Sarah.
a real stooge for water because I managed to get my water from based on the rateable value on the property tax of solar water value to a meter. I realized my meter is about 1 cubic meter per quarter. It was a little leverage first one, so I was urinating in the sink and a little bit. At one time, I wasn't even flushing the toilet until I'd been shitting about 5 days. Because used to that in Nigeria, where we wouldn't be able to the water, we only flush the toilet once a day. So it was, I think, full of insects on the shin. You know, very
I think I saw Sarah and Barb had something as well. Sarah, did you have something?
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, I have a front yard that has no lawn. I actually haven't watered it in years and years and years. Now, maybe the groundwater is higher here because we're fairly close to the bay, but um, it was actually done by a Quaker friend of mine. I think Joe might know of him, Paul Turner. He grew up with me and Carl and a bunch of other Quaker teens in that era. Anyway, he came, he did the yard for us way back when, and it's still really lovely. But another thing I was thinking of was I have a washer and a dryer, and I've been wanting for a while just to kind of get set up and get into the habit of just dry, you know, when the weather permits, which it usually does, is to dry my clothes outside in the fresh air and the sunshine. Uh, Easier on the clothes, easier on the environment. They smell really good when they've been out there in the fresh air. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure if I could deal with sheets and towels, maybe, but the clothes I should be able to deal with.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's one thing I could think of. It's pretty simple.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
Sheets actually dry better on the clothesline.
Yeah. I think that's.
They don't get up in a great big ball and, you know, like you do in the dryer.
Yeah.
And they do smell good. Your bed smells so good. The fresh air.
Yeah. Barb?
I know we're getting close to time, but I just wanted to mention that we reduced our water use by 50% by taking showers with buckets. And I'm not real crazy about that, but you know, Rich is my green Berkeley recycle guy. And he convinced me. And so we use that water for the garden and other things, and it works. So.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Great. Yeah, we are coming. Well, boy, we're almost at 8:30.
Could Tom please read the long chapter put inside from one of the reasons I've been reluctant. I've just got to go get my charge because I'm down to 2% power.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. So yeah. So yeah. I think we'll start to finish up. I did have one more query that I wanted to get. I don't know if people want to pursue it, but I was thinking, relating to the fact that, you know, as Barb said, you know, we really need to initiate conversations as much as possible. And one query that I came up with was, what if you wanted to talk about climate change to someone but didn't? What stopped you, and what could you have done differently? What now would you think you've done differently in that conversation? I don't know if anybody had any response to that. That you one time that you wanted to talk about climate change and didn't. Anyone? Okay. Well, I'll just say that when I was thinking about it, there were a few years ago when I was in and it relates to, something that we were talking about earlier about people being threatened by change. I was in a taxi with someone who was, one of my IHSS recipients. And the taxi driver suddenly just started going off about, about about the climate change being a, this government this hoax and stuff like that. And I was just silent because I didn't, I was at work, for this guy. I didn't want to ruffle things between him and the driver, but at the same time I just felt like I wish I had said something. And now, given the what I've gotten from Katharine Hayhoe, is I could have initiated a very positive conversation. Says, yeah, I understand that you're really concerned about this, and you're concerned about the availability of gasoline, and this is going to be threatening your livelihood. Maybe you could think about how much, if you got yourself an electric car, maybe if the government was able to get you an electric car, that you would be producing less pollution, and and staging a conversation like that. So so I'm thinking about some of these conversations that could have happened in the past, and thinking about ways I could do them better in the future. Does anybody else have any other ideas about that?
One of the brilliant ideas I had about a couple of days ago was to try to have more virtual meetings with people using iPads attached to mobile phone usage, so you could take people into wildernesses with an iPad showing you the walks you're doing. I believe if Sarah Tyrrell could show me her walks on the baby, so that we get familiar with what the area looks like on the ground, rather than just sitting across the living rooms. So when I get hot, I can take it. If you get up early in the morning, I can take her walks in my local areas like Woodsie Woods, so that he can learn each other's habitats properly. Because I'm very familiar with habitats around Evanston, and with Evanston friends, because I like to know how much Linwood's and Scotia Woods have deteriorated. The Scotia Woods, for example, in winter, there's only one place 100 feet where the ice caves on winter, so a bald eagle still there once, and I thought my first really rare bird was a black crown night hare, which ordinary winters south of Cairo, and things like that. So I could do that with Evanston, but I'd like to learn how to the habitats and the wildernesses and how to walk around Berkeley, as well as friends could take an iPad, arrange for me, and then I could, if they could get away in the morning, I could take on art walks on our own walks, so we could learn the habitats from and learn to respect the changes in habitats. And can Thomas, please just come. There's one really long chats I put, so there, so Dick can know what I've put in the chat. It was a long time about having a method induction course by taking some rock climbing in Sheffield, instead of just so you've got a community around when you're coming off a method, rather than just having the person doing your own and still with a lot of addicts around you.
Well, I can't think of a specific example, but I tend to be interested in scientific questions like the absorption spectrum of carbon dioxide versus nitrogen, oxygen, and well, maybe the remote thing, like the fact that the scientists predict that if we continue, or at least 20 years ago, they predicted if we continued the way we were going, that Sacramento would look like Tucson in 100 years. But it seems to me that there are kind of more concrete things that might communicate to people. And maybe if I talk about what I eat, that might be of interest. I mean, she gave, Hayhoe gave quantitative numbers and said that a pound of hamburger takes requires 100 pounds of carbon, or maybe carbon dioxide to produce it. A pound of chicken requires only 20 pounds, and a pound of vegetables or fruit requires only 1 pound. And my guess is that if you grow the vegetables in your garden, that actually the vegetables are composed of carbon dioxide. You may actually have a negative, you may actually be taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and you eat those vegetables that you've grown in the garden. So I might talk about that.
Yeah, sorry, friends, I lost my connection here. I lost the connection. I'm sorry, I missed out on your responses for the last few
Oh,
minutes.
just my response is that in general, try to be concrete about not what you think scientifically, but what you're doing and the reasons you're doing, and for instance, what you're eating.
Yeah. Okay.
And how
Well, yeah.
A hamburger requires a pound of hamburger requires 100 pounds of carbon. A pound of chicken requires only 20 pounds of carbon to produce it. And a pound of vegetables, according to her, requires only 1 pound of carbon to produce it.
Okay. Well, on that note, friends, I think
Have you lost the chat, Thomas? Can you read it, or do I have to repost it here? I could email it to you if you want, Thomas.
Okay. I don't have the chat now because I lost my connection.
I just emailed you now.
I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry. I lost my connection.
I can email my chat to you now.
I think it would be good idea to go ahead and end now. I really appreciate everybody participating. I'd like to end with at least a few moments of silent worship. And once again, thanks, Jeannie, for recording this session and posting it to the Berkeley YouTube channel. I'll let people know when it's available. And if we could just go ahead and end with a few moments of silence now. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom, for organizing this. It was very useful.
Thank you so
I love the
much.
book.
It's been great.
Okay, friends, thanks again. And also, if we actually do get those study materials from Katharine Hayhoe, I will share those as well. But in the meantime, we have the videos, and we have some other ideas for other projects or discussion. So thanks for participating, and I'll talk to you later.
Thank you all.
Yeah,
Thanks so much for organizing.
Thank you.
this. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thanks all. Take care.
When will you talk to us, Tom?
What's that again?
When you say you will talk to us later? When?
Oh, I don't know. We'll see what we can do. Outreach and Nurture and the Social Environmental Action Committee. I'm thinking of doing a discussion on Michael Mann's book, The New Climate Wars, but that's a possibility. There's other possibilities, but right now I've got other things I need to take care of as well.
Great.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.